I shared that with Rabbi Eddie Abramson. I don't think you know him, but he said only a mathematician would come up with that.
That's right. Okay, first of all, Erev Tov. Second of all, Emunah asked me a question when she came on before everyone else did, and asked me, how was my Chag? The normal response to that is, Baruch Hashem, everything was wonderful. However, it was a difficult Chag. On Shabbat, a couple days before the Chag, right after Shabbat, I got a message from my daughter, who lives now 2 doors down from me, that my son-in-law's mother, i.e. my mechutenet, my mechutenesta, had a heart attack. And 66 years old, and they rushed her to the hospital, and he wasn't going to go until the next day. 10 minutes later, I got a call from his brother, come now to the hospital. Unfortunately, at 1:30 in the morning, she passed away. So the family's still in shock. The Levaya was Erev Chag. The way it works, the halacha is that if you sit Shiva even for a few minutes before the Chag cancels Shiva. So he basically had no Shiva. So first, before anything, I'll say that the Shir tonight's in memory of Rivka Bat Yosef Meir, Le'ilu Nishmata. It's been tough. He spent Chag with his father. They just made Aliyah 6 months ago. Meaning my in-laws, by my son's parents. To Rehovot.
Rivka and her husband.
Sorry, Rivka and her husband Ira.
Sure who made that.
Rivka and her husband.
They came on Aliyah.
Right, 6 months ago only. And it was her lifelong dream, and she lasted 6 months here and just passed away suddenly. So it's been a shock for the family. It's been hard to focus, to be honest with you. It's been hard to concentrate. On the day, on Erev Chag, was the Levaya, and with the exception of learning Mishnayot in the morning, and of course answering a million phone calls and texts and all, I literally did almost nothing the entire day other than the Levaya, helping with my children, my grandchildren. And since then I found it very hard to be able to focus. So when I'm preparing this class tonight, besides obviously wanting to dedicate it in her memory, Le'ilu Nishmata, I also wanted to make sure that we're taking something that's been at the beginning at least, this chapter, this section, very esoteric, and try to bring it down to the real world to be a little bit more understandable. Yesterday, as Shavuot afternoon, I gave a shiur on the topic of Avirad de Eretz Yisrael Machkim, which means that the environment, the air, the atmosphere of being in Israel makes one wiser. And I discussed at the beginning of the shiur of the difference between understanding something that is abstract and something that's concrete. If I tried to tell you to explain to me what a table is, you can, or you can just point to a table and say, that's a table. When I ask you what is love, if I ask you what is hatred, what is tiredness, all these different things that are kind of hard to concretize, so it's a little bit more difficult. And we're right now at that section of the book where he's going to take some topics which we mentioned last time, it's been I think 2-3 weeks now, of something we call Hiuli, which we are just going to loosely translate as energy, and how that belief by the philosophers that it existed and what it did. We haven't really seen what exactly their intention is with this. I'm going to do a little spoiler alert. We're going to look at one section now that basically is going to be a long way of the philosopher saying that everything is mikre. Everything is happenstance, just happened. We'll see obviously a little bit longer. What I plan to do is to read the Hebrew and the English tonight, both, and then try and translate it into normal English. And then we're going to take a look at Rav Aviner's commentary. But the spoiler alert is not just that. When I learned after high school, I learned in Shalavim for 2 years. And my second year, I had a Rav who was magnificent. He was a young guy. Now he's probably 70, I imagine, at least. He was a young guy then, a new Rav. And we learned Kuzari. And I really don't remember much of it. I remember being enthralled by some of the ideas. But there's one thing I remember that he said that the Kuzari more or less says, and it's in this general area, said to believe that the world just came into existence, to believe that things just happen, is like believing that you could take a ball of thread, put it into a closet, And 1,000 years later, open up the closet and find a suit hanging there because it made itself just by happenstance. So this is where we're at now. We ended off in the 4th essay on the topic of emunah. We're starting, the majority of the 5th essay is also about emunah, and we had kind of a table of contents of different topics. The first one being probably the most abstract, which is this concept of energy. And we're going to see tonight how energy then caused this to happen, caused that to happen, by happenstance that. So we're going to take a look. So we're in the middle of paragraph, I think it's 2. Yeah, paragraph 2. We're about halfway through the paragraph where it says, V'achar ken chiyev chefetz ha'elokim. In the English, afterwards, Hashem's or God's divine will and wisdom. So it's in the middle of paragraph 2. I'm sorry, hang on one second. This has to do with the whole thing with my mother-in-law. Just a minute, I'm sorry. Teach will reply after my son. Okay. So if you find it, I'm not sure what page it is. I don't have the same copy you have. I have a different version. I'll read the Hebrew.
Can you just say the first few words?
Yes, it says V'achar ken chiyev chefetz ha'elokim. It's
Chiyev im Yud Echad.
What's that? Yeah. Say that again.
Chiyev im Yud Echad. Ken. Got it.
Okay. V'achar ken chiyev chefetz ha'elokim v'chochmato. Okay. So last time we learned about the topic of hiuli, which we're just again translating as energy. And now what he's going to do, the king, quoting concept of philosophers, is talking about what that energy does. Now you got to bear with me for a minute as I read this paragraph and explain it or translate it, and then we're going to talk about a little more what it means. So afterwards, God's divine will was mandated that the outermost sphere in the heaven, or in the let's say the heaven, should rotate. It should rotate 24 hours completely. And as it rotates, everything else within its sphere would also rotate for 24 hours, a complete rotation. What does he do? He used this energy, this hiuli, which was arranged or was in the space of the sphere of the moon. They would be affected by changes in its rotation. So the first thing he says is that this energy that supposedly, remember, you have to go back and think, and we'll see, we're going to address in a little while, the fact that we're really talking about an uneducated people as far as astronomy. At this time period, we still believe that the Earth was in the center of the universe and that everything revolved around the Earth. The concept of a solar system, that everything revolved around the sun, was not yet known. But in this point, he's telling us that the energy that surrounded the moon somehow affected all the other things within the atmosphere, in the heavens, from this energy. The first change was through this energy was the heating of the atmosphere. That which was closest to the rotation of the moon. Because whatever was closer to the source of this hiuli would be affected most. Now, this is going to sound, on one hand, completely foreign to us. This idea of the energy and the energy affects this. And on the other hand, we can also understand something very simply. We know that the moon affects the tides on Earth. That's not what he's talking. He's not talking about a gravitational pull. He's talking about this concept of hiuli. Vishav esh, I'm going to turn the page here just a second. Vishav esh zakat. And then what happens is this atmosphere becomes a very fine fire. The philosophers call that the elemental fire. This elemental fire is invisible. It doesn't burn. But what is it? It's a very fine and pure entity. Kira'uhu galgal ha'esh.
No, it still snows.
It was called the layer of fire. The next step away from the moon was called the air sphere. And then there was the sphere of water. And then was earth. Which is the center. Again, he's talking about the fact that the earth is the center of the universe. That the planet Earth itself is the heaviest and densest of these four things: earth, wind, water, fire, which we've talked about before. From these four entities, everything comes into existence. Okay. Does anyone here understand Yiddish?
The missile.
Okay. There's an expression in Yiddish. Was hat gesagt. What is he saying? What in the world is he telling us? Right? Like, wow, that's a lot of words, not saying very much, is it? Okay, so let's take a look a little bit at Rav Aviner. We're going to look at one paragraph only. One or two little paragraphs. I'm going to put my glasses on now so I can see. Oops, share screen, PowerPoint. Here we go. Let's move you all over a bit. Lachar miken. On your screen, you should see now. Lachar miken b'shalav ha'havana haba. At this next stage of our understanding, Amru ha'pilosofim, the philosophers said, Sha'chochma ha'elokit hanizkeret lemala gazra seder havaya. That the wisdom, the divine wisdom mentioned earlier, is what determined existence. Now, now we're going to use this concept of divine will and plug it in to astronomy, but ancient understanding of astronomy. Kadura Aretz nimtza bemerkaz ha'olam. In the old times, obviously before the concept of the solar system, it was believed that the world was the center of the universe. It was believed that the earth was in the center of the universe, and the stars would revolve around the earth once every 24 hours. And furthermore, he clarified, is mefaret, okay, fine in English. But it doesn't have anything to do with us. We know that the astronomy has changed completely since then, right? We know that the earth is not the center of the universe, but rather my wife is. But besides that, at least my universe, that the center of the universe is the sun. Omnam, and she's not even here, by the way. Omnam, the concept is still the same. What is it? Kol hatnuyot b'havaya hein ba'alot machzoriot kvua. All the movements in existence all have a specific preset cycle. And where we see it the most clear is the stars. There are other places we see the concept of circulation. And then he continues to explain. How did this idea of this unidentifiable, this amorphic, this abstract idea of Huli, how did that come down and come to something concrete in the world? First, there was this initial location of this sphere of fire, the actual idea, the essence of fire, what we today call energy. And after that came air, mayim, water, and the earth, which is earth. This is the basic foundation of old-time physics. Made up of the four elements: afar, mayim, avir, esh, earth, water, air, fire. Nozel, gaz, energia. We have solid, liquid, gas, and energy today. Every item is a little bit more abstract than the item before it in that list. For example, Galea kol chodrim derech hakir. We also know that sound waves can pierce a wall. I can talk down here, and someone at the door closed upstairs can hear it. The highest level, the most abstract. Again, we're talking. He's explaining the idea of the philosophers that the most abstract. And by the way, I promise you, Bezrat Hashem, the entire Ma'amar is not going to be this crazy. I shouldn't say crazy. This abstract and difficult to understand. But the highest level is this hiuli, or what we will call it. I'm translating as energy. We already know that this current level of physics, let me change the next slide, is slightly different today. I lost the place, let me find it. Okay. But the foundation, the idea is the same. We also will say, we know that there's a seder. We've talked about this multiple times. But there's an order to the universe. And from this order in the universe, through the order of the universe, we can look at it and say only an actual omnipotent creator could have created something like this. Also, Rabbeinu Bachya wrote in Chovot HaLevavot, Min ha'olam sheseder adir mushlam shekazeh no yachol liot mikri. Something that we have, the universe, is impossible to truly believe just happened. Yes, the frogs just crawled out of the water and became this, and then they became a human being. And just happens that the planet Mars just happens to be where it is and doesn't bump into the planet Pluto, which is maybe not a planet, who knows. For example, you have ink spilled over a table. If you spill ink on a table, it won't just happen to start spelling out words or make a drawing. If that does happen, then it obviously was because someone wanted it to arrange it in such a way. Now, what's he saying? Let me see if this is it. This is Data Philosophium. That's the next one, I think. Yes, I'm not going to go to that one yet. Let's take it off of screen share. He starts off telling us, and we haven't finished the whole thought yet of the this is the Rav talking about what the philosophers believe. We're in the middle of this idea. I'm sorry, this is the where are we at here? I lost the place. I just closed the book by accident. Hold on. Right. Okay, yeah. So the Rav is still talking here, and this is what the philosophers believe, that it's all happenstance. Where did it all come from? Oh, I'll tell you where it came from. Hewley, Mr. Abstract. Now, the Kuzari listens to this, and he hears this idea, and he says something's not adding up. Let's take a look at the paragraph 3 in the book. Paragraph 3, where it says, Amar Kuzari, the Kuzari said, I see that according to the philosophers, these elements, earth, wind, fire, etc., just happened. They just by accident kind of came out of nowhere. By the fact that they say, because they said whatever is closest to the celestial sphere caused the element to be fire. And that which was farther away became the earth. And whatever was kind of in the middle became that everything in the middle between the energy at one end by the moon that was seen to be driving everything and the physical earth and the dirt and all, that the water and the air kind of came out of this lower level energy as it got lower towards the earth. So he says, that is how I see what you're trying to tell me, Rabbi, my dear sir. Okay, let's understand this also, what he's trying to tell us. Let's take a look at the next slide from Avinar. Okay, let me make this a little bigger. Whoops. Okay, Rav Avinar says as follows. L'data Philosophium. Now what Rav Avinar is saying is that the way that the king is understanding the rabbis as follows. Ladata philosophy, according to the philosophers, everything just happened by happenstance. There was no what we refer to as ilata ilot, and no one creator. The entire development of creation, hakol ira b'mikre. Everything happened by accident or by happenstance. Mi'ashemesh, the avir, the mayim, the afar, all these things, the sun, the air, the water, the dirt. The mashal, for example. I like this. Tama mazon lamata, when there was no more food on the ground, nitarech tzavaron shel hazebrot, v'afchu lejirafot. Once the zebra ran out of food on the ground, suddenly, by happenstance, his neck got real long. He became a giraffe so he can eat from the trees. And every giraffe is just a former zebra. Which is a result, just a happenstance result of a problem that came up with the lack of food, the gova namuch, at the lower level. And was going to be solved, he would survive by his neck stretching out. Now, this is not to make fun of the concept of what's it called? What's it called? Adaptation in nature. What's it called? I'm not talking, God forbid.
Natural selection?
Not natural selection, okay, let's just use the word adaptation. Animals have to adapt to their environment to be able to do what they have to do. We're not talking about that. We're talking about, he's giving us a very mugzam, a very exaggerated idea that, how do we get giraffes? It must be that they ran out of food when they were zebras, and now their necks got long so they can eat from the tall trees. If according to that opinion, that approach, with that same mindset, that same approach, there was plenty of food, then everything could just become snakes and zachal, what do you call it? Caterpillars, they all crawl on the ground. Continue, forget that line. Hagalgal, the sphere, marach hakochavim b'shamayim me'aleinu. Somehow this sphere is a part of the system of our stars in the heavens, me'en galgala nakamistovev, kind of like a giant wheel that's moving everything around in the universe. And it must be that all these different stars somehow are glued to this wheel. In other words, imagine for a moment, what he's saying is that what the philosophers claim is that, just picture like you would do like in a fourth grade science project, you take all these sticks and you stick a little balls of what do you call it onto it? My mind's not working. Styrofoam balls. And you paint one red because it's Mars and all that stuff. And they're all used, and if we turn the middle, then everything moves together. That's must be. What he didn't know, Aristotle, was that it was the earth that turned. Not some big giant wheel that's turning everything. That's only an imaginary thing. According to Aristotle, the fact that the stars all moved in the heavens at the same speed, it must mean, why do the stars all move through the universe at the same rate? They must all be attached to one gigantic wheel. This is because they could never have imagined that the stars are set in their spot from our perspective. We're moving. This is the concept of relativity. If you're standing next to a bus and the bus is zooming by, it's not Einstein's theory of relativity at all. I'm talking about the concept of relative motion, not relativity in the sense of Einstein. If a bus whizzes by and you're stationary, it moves at the speed it's moving at 50 kilometers per hour. You're witnessing it going at 50. But if you're moving along next to it at 25 miles per hour, it doesn't appear to be moving at 50 miles per hour necessarily. It moves faster than you, but not necessarily at 50. They assumed, they imagined that if the earth was turning at its extreme, crazy speed, as we know today, we would fly off the earth because of the speed that the earth is spinning, moving at rather. Their mistake was that the farther we would be away from the center of the earth, would be angular and non-linear velocity. Don't ask me to explain that. Therefore, Inana Chashim, whoops, right? Inana Chashim. Whoops, I skipped. B'mehirut shel kadur haaretz, 40,000 kilometers every 24 hours. Wait 1 second, let me do this. Hold on 1 second.
I can explain the difference between linear and angular velocity.
Yeah, but I don't want to get it. I know. I thought you would, but I don't want to get into that detail at the moment.
That's why I was asking, just in case. Okay.
Thank you. That we move actually at a speed of 40,000 kilometers every 24 hours. נוצרו מצבים במציאות המכונים בפינו מצבי צבירה בסדר התפתחותי, אש, אוויר, מים, עפר. We have some kind of an accumulation of various states that we had that develop water, fire, air, water, and earth. הכל על פי הכרחים פיזיקליים אוטומטיים, כך על ידי הפילוסופים. Bottom line, the philosophers believe, not today necessarily, believed now wait a second, why are we talking about this? Why is this even here? Remember, this whole section we talked about is going to be about emunah, belief in God, understanding the presence of God. Well, if you believe that things just happen by happenstance, and you believe there's this gigantic wheel in the heavens that's connected to all the stars and it's moving all the stars, what's to believe in? There's no emunah. You have this big wheel in the sky affecting everything. There was a comedian, George Carlin, who was a filthy comedian. But he had one hysterical line. He said, he was a devout atheist. He didn't believe in God. He said, people are stupid who believe in God. He said, let me understand something. People are willing to believe there's some guy with a long white beard in the sky, and he runs the world, and he makes sure everything runs how it is. And they believe that. But when they see a sign that says wet paint, they have to touch it to make sure. So you think about that. There's a point there he has, right? You said we're in any case. So right now, where are we holding? We're holding that the statement of the philosophers is, and reiterated by the king, reiterated by the Rav, and now reiterated by Rav Aviner, is that everything that we witness in this world, all existence, is happenstance. There is no sovev mesovev. There is no creator. There is no actually, just a second. Let me grab. I can do it on the computer. I don't have to look it up. Just a minute. I'll share the screen with you in a second, so I can read you the text. Just a second. Okay, here we go. Now, let me go back to here. Let's do a screen share with here. Okay, the very first statement in the Rambam. I'll give it to you here in English and Hebrew. Again, I've mentioned this before. If you're not familiar with this website, Safaria, you have to have it as an app, and it's on your computer. There's nothing like that out there right now. Yesod HaYesodot. This is the very first thing the Rambam writes in all of his work. Yesod HaYesodot v'Amud HaChachamot, which you notice is Yud Kei Vav Kei, the name of Hashem in the initial letters of those first four words. The foundation of foundation and the firmest pillar of all wisdom is laid out to know. Sheyesham Matzui Rishon. There is an initial first being. V'hu mamtzi kol hanimtza, and he caused everything to be. V'chol hanimtzaim mishamayim va'aretz, and everything that exists in the heavens and the earth. U'masha beinehem, and everything in between. Lo nimtzu ela amitat himatz'o. Only exist because of Hashem. When Hashem does not want the item to exist, it would not exist any longer. It only came into existence because God wanted it to come to existence. I bring this on the screen now to show you the antithesis and the exact opposite of what it is the philosophers believe at this point where we are in the book. Okay, so it's a very important understanding that one of Yesodot, one of the fundamental principles in Judaism, is that there's a creator. Let's take a look at paragraph 3. Paragraph 4. Amar HaChaver, the Rav said. Okay. Oy vey, tov. I'm debating if I should, just a second. Okay, here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to read this actually only in English. I have a reason. I'll tell you what my reason is. And I don't think I've ever done this with the Kuzari, just reading it in English. Paragraph 4, I'm going to do it in English because when we read it, if I read it in Hebrew and then translate it along the way, we're going to lose the flow of something. And this, I kind of need to read most of the way through, and then we're going to go back and discuss it. Okay? So paragraph 4, English, where it says, the rabbi said. Now, my English is not, you see, I don't remember this Rav Karabkin also. Okay, it is Daniel Karabkin's translation, but it's in a different version, so it may or may not be the same words. The rabbi said, paragraph 4, nevertheless, they are forced to acknowledge a higher wisdom. Who's they? Means the philosophers are forced to acknowledge a higher wisdom that separates each element into an intrinsically unique entity. This is because when we examine the differences between fire and air, between air and water, and between water and earth, we do not distinguish them by saying that one is more and the other is less, that one is stronger and the other is weaker. In other words, we don't say fire is stronger or is just really water but stronger. Air is really weaker earth. Earth is stronger. We don't, they're individual units. Rather, each substance has a unique form of its own, such that one exclusively was made into fire, another into air, another into water, another into earth. So first of all, we can't say that the Huli brought about the fire, which brought about the air, which brought about the water, which brought about the earth. Chad Gadya, Chad Gadya. We can't say that. It makes no sense. That's first of all. Were this not the case, then one could argue that the contents of our entire sphere is just made up of just one element. Earth, for example, that is merely less dense in one place than in another. Or, for example, that it is completely fire. The Earth is just fire. Just that the fire that descended further away from the sphere's orbit, meaning the moon, is a denser and cooler fire on Earth. But we can disprove this by noting that the elements commingle with one another, and each element retains its unique form and innate nature. We see, now listen to this, we see air, water, and earth in the same place, and in contact with each other, yet each remains distinct from the other. Fire does not become water. Water does not become earth. Air does not become fire. They can interact. As a matter of fact, without air, fire dies. They can feed on each other. Fire will get stronger with air, but fire doesn't become air. Water doesn't become earth. They're distinct and unique objects. Again, he's trying with this paragraph that's a little long, not actually, but somewhat, to disprove the idea that one begat the other that came to the other. Subparagraph 3, if a book has the same notation. The only exception to this is when some elements transform into others because of external causes that cause their transformation. Water can then receive the form of air, and air can receive the form of fire. But in these instances, the elements are thoroughly transformed into new elements, such that the elements will be distinguished from the other elements by their new inherent properties, not just by their incidental properties. What does it mean that water can receive the form of air? How does water become air? Think.
Evaporation.
Evaporation. Right. You see water, take a pan of water, just put it out. Just leave it. You don't do anything with it. Forget heating it up. Just leave it. And X amount of time, it's going to be gone. Where did it go? It turned into air. Right? It evaporated, the molecules changed into different type. But now what it is, it's not any longer, well, that's really water I'm looking up there in my, 3 feet up there, that's water. No, it's air. You don't say it's water that has changed. It's air.
When you look at a cloud in the sky, is it water or air?
Yes. Yes. Depends what, yeah. If it's saturated, it's water. Until there are droplets of water in there and air. It's both.
It's a combination. It's a mixture.
Right. That's why I said yes.
Yeah.
That's fourth grade science, all back in there. At least at the fourth grade, I paid attention. This observation of higher wisdom caused some of the philosophers to state that there exists an active intellect operating under divine direction, which gives each element its form. The active intellect similarly gives a unique form to each species of plants and living creatures, which are made of the four elements. We do not distinguish a vine from a palm tree by its incidental qualities, but rather by its intrinsic form. This is because one's form makes it intrinsically different from something with a different form. We do, however, use incidental qualities to distinguish one vine from another and one palm tree from another. What does that mean? What's he talking about in normal English? If I compare a palm tree to a rose, how would I do that? Would I say a rose is really just a really tiny palm tree, but it has red petals? No, they have common things. They have common denominators. They both grow. They both need water. They both need air. They both need sun, but they're distinct in their qualities. But if I have a palm tree, a male palm tree and a female, I don't know if you know that, but a date palm, they're female and male. That's how they cross, that pollinate, and that's how we get dates and all those other wonderful things that we get. We can say that they're the same thing, but one's a male and one's a female. Thus, for example, we may say that one is black or the other is white, or that one is sweeter than the other, or the one is longer than the other, or shorter, or the one is thicker, the other is thinner, and so forth. But when it comes to intrinsic qualities, there's no more or less. We don't say that one horse is less horse-like than another horse, or the one human being is more human than another, except chamas yimach shemam. This is because the intrinsic quality of being a horse or being a human is universal to all of the individual components of each respective species. Meaning, I'm a human being, you're a human being. What distinguishes me from you? Well, we have about 99% of the exact same DNA. I hate to tell you that. What makes me different? My neshama, my certain characteristics, that 1% of my DNA that's different than your DNA. But we're all human beings. We fall into that same category. Philosophers have thus begrudgingly acknowledged that these intrinsic forms are granted by a divinity. They call this entity the intellect that grants form. So we started to break through a little bit of a ceiling. What's the ceiling we started to break through? I don't know whether to put the glasses on, take them off, put them on, take them off. We started with the perspective that in the philosophical world, back then at least, maybe there was some godly figure somewhere out there, but what he really did was he caused certain things to happen, then everything else by happenstance. And there's this giant wheel that holds the universe together and things revolve around it. That's why there's this perspective of everything has a certain order to it. And then there's this energy that surrounded our moon. Why our moon? Go figure, I don't know. And this energy led to fire, which led to water, which led to earth, air and earth, which also meant if one led to the other, they would have to be similar in nature, right? If a parent has a child, the child is not completely distinct. It's a distinct individual, but it's a descendant and it's part of that original parent. So you would say, my dear philosopher, that if the Hiyuli gave us the fire and the fire gave us the air, that the air should be a subcategory of the fire, but it's not. They have distinct properties, and only a supreme being, a creator, could have done that. So begrudgingly, he ends up with the idea that, okay, there must be something out there. Now, where are we going with this? Again, it's still all connecting to the topic of emunah. Everyone sitting here now believes in Hashem. Everyone sitting here in the screen believes that Hashem created the world. Everyone here believes that nothing exists without without the desire of Hashem for having that item to exist, whether it's a blade of grass, a kangaroo, you, me, and the entire universe.
That was a Ktimon for Rosh Hashanah.
That's right. That's right. Correct. So
Yom Harat Olam.
Huh?
Also Yom Harat Olam.
Hayom Harat Olam, or if you said it in the United States, Hayom Haras Olam, the day the world is destroyed.
Yeah, that's the joke the Sfaradim tell on the Ashkenazim.
Absolutely. So where are we going? Where's he gotten to now? He's gotten to the point where the philosophers have to, there's this chink in the armor. Something's not 100%. We can't exactly believe what we believed, meaning the philosophers, because something's wrong here. The next step will be the Rab is going to do a little bit more of then moving into the Emunah section, moving into what I mentioned, I think on a message last week, going to move into a little bit of what's called Bechira Chofshit, free choice. We'll see how he makes that jump next week, Bezrat Hashem. Let me just check something next week. Tuesday, the 25th of May, Tuesday, fine. Okay, Bezrat Hashem. Next Tuesday night we'll continue at paragraph 5. And let me just see something. We have a few shorter paragraphs, a little bit more back and forth. Then we're going to into some long discussions from the king and from the rabbi, rather, dealing with the elements and stuff. I want to just make a general comment. When I was at school about a week ago, I was sitting with the principal and one of the teachers, who are actually very learned individuals. And I mentioned that I teach Kuzari and that we had just started the 5th essay. And both of them at the same time went like this. Oy. Because the 5th essay is known to be difficult. It's esoteric. It deals with stuff that we're not used to dealing with. It's dealing with some deep thoughts. And especially if you do it once a week, you lose maybe a little bit of flow. I'm not giving up. I'm going to do as best as I can here to explain with the help of Rav Aviner and translation. But hang in there, because I promise you, Bezrat Hashem, it's going to be really worth it. Some really cool stuff coming up. Okay, so with that note, I will wish you all a good evening, a good day tomorrow, and just B'sorot Tovot. Bezrat Hashem.
Thank you, Rabbi.
You're very welcome.
Thank you very
Emunah,
much. It's
I don't
great
care
to be
what
back.
I don't care what. Yeah, thank you. Good to have you. I don't care what people tell you there. You do what you do. Got it?
I do what I do, but we were
Yes.
trying, they were trying very hard to convince us that the second day had much, much more Kedusha than the first day.
That is probably one of the, pardon the word, stupidest statements I've ever heard in my life. But besides that, ask them, why does the Tanakh mention over 800 times that this is our home here in Israel, and doesn't mention anything about a second day of Chag? I don't know. It's kind of strange, isn't it?
Very strange.
Yeah, I don't know. There's something about that. Fools. Okay.
Yep.
Oh, was that out loud? Fine. Have a good evening. Have a good
Thank
day.
you, Rabbi. And I'm
You're
sorry
welcome.
that
I lost them.
your
Thank
schedule
you.
was not
Thank you
so
very much.
pleasant.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.